Alright, so I'm sure most of you guys have already heard about this, but I just wanted to make a video about this new finding that Google recently discovered. And basically, they found that a group of women, I don't know if they sued them or what exactly they were doing, but they were claiming that they were underpaying them. So then Google does this big investigation, and they actually find out that they're overpaying women, or in other words, underpaying men. And this is something that's a really big issue because it's the opposite of what the majority of people think is going on in society. And it's the other reason why it's important is that we have this idea that society is biased against women, when in reality it's the exact opposite. I've made videos about this before, and I'll be making videos about it in the future, I'm sure, but we need to keep talking about it because people have this idea that society is so biased against women when in reality it isn't. And this is just another example on top of the endless amounts of examples that prove it. In that um, women basically are overpaid. I mean, in essence, I mean, Google is one of the biggest companies in, I assume, the world, especially in the U.S. But and the fact that they're overpaying women is proof that I'm sure pretty much every big company out there is doing it. And a lot of people may ask why this is going on, how it could happen. In that, number one, never was, there never really was a bias. Well, shouldn't say never really. There never was a bias against women in society, especially Western society. In other societies, yes, but not Western societies. But everyone, or not everyone, but pretty well everyone bought into the idea that there was this bias against women. So what ended up happening is that all these preferential laws get passed under the guise of getting them equal with men when they already were equal with men. So you get stuff like this. They go from being equal to men to getting these laws that are, supposed to be getting them equal, which actually gets them more. Um, and like I said, given that one of the biggest companies in the world is doing it, I would bet money that pretty well every other, multi-billion-dollar company is doing it as well. Um, Now that something like this has came out, it probably would make people more skeptical of doing it in the future. So I'm just going to kind of read a little bit about this study. Um, so obviously it's from San Francisco. So Google conducted a recent study to determine whether or not the company was underpaying women and members of minority groups. It found, to the surprise of just about everyone, that men were paid less money for work that women were doing. The study, which disproportionately led to pay raises for thousands of men, is done every year. But the latest findings at Google in Silicon Valley face increasing pressure to deal with gender issues in the workplace, from sexual harassment to wage discrimination. Um, and I don't really want to read too much more. But the other thing they mentioned too is minority groups, and that's another one I'm sure are overpaid as well. Not because they're just distinctly, lower paid or whatever. It's that whites and Asians have higher IQs, which means they're going to be making more money on average, which means what's going to happen is you're going to see blacks or Hispanics or whatever group you want to talk about that are not, or a lower IQ than average, which whites are about average. So anyone claiming that people who talk about race and IQ are white supremacists, or you can tell they don't even know what they're doing. Because if you were a supremacist of whatever kind, why would you want to put yourself as an average in the group? That makes no sense. But the lower IQ races and whatnot would be disproportionately promoted within organizations compared to more high performing and higher qualified whites and Asians and Jews, I guess. But back to the whole gender thing. Um, this is something that again I've made videos about it before, and I just wanted to stress that we're seeing more and more evidence of this, and it's going to continue until we can finally admit that the truth is that women are not underpaid. They're not. I mean, there is maybe some bias against women, but there's bias against men, and the main difference between the two is that anywhere in society where there's bias or men being unfairly treated, we're not allowed to talk about it. It's generally dismissed as a non-issue, but wherever there's somewhere where women are disproportionately targeted or and in any way unequal, we have to bend over, bow over, whatever you want to say, and address it until women are equal, or in most cases, even more than equal. And that's something that is kind of the take-home message: is that the only way to fix this is to let us talk openly about differences, because women and men are not the same. There's things that men have on average that are going to make it more advantageous for them, and there's things that women have, uh, as women, that are going to make it more advantageous for them. And the difference is that a lot of men's advantages are more geared towards competitiveness and something that would be more advantageous um, in a work environment, which is why you find this, men are more CEOs and whatnot. Men are more, the really high performing individuals tend to be men, is because evolution determined that it would be more advantageous for men to have the traits of super high performers. And for people who are going to argue this, number one, you're a very big hypocrite, because um, atheists always lecture Christians and the Christian Republicans and the Christian conservatives about how they deny science, and the whole climate denial. That's another big one. Is, oh, you guys are denying science, even though climate change is largely over generalized. But that's another issue. So they love talking to people about how you're denying evolution when it comes to Christianity, and you're denying science when it comes to climate change. But yet they completely ignore the facts that tens of thousands of years of evolution have went down, that have determined that men and women are not the same. It's more advantageous for men to be able to be assertive, and men have high testosterone. They have more strength. So, in other words, men have evolved to have traits that are more advantageous to being perform highly in a work environment, and women have evolved to have traits that aren't quite that way. Women are more agreeable, which means they're going to be much less likely to ask for a raise, to challenge societal norms, things like that, to be entrepreneurs, stuff like that, which are, you look at a lot of the billionaires and CEOs out there, those are traits of those kind of people. They're moderately to highly disagreeable. They're probably a little bit narcissistic. They're stronger individuals usually. They have very high IQs, which women tend to not. Men and women's IQs are relatively the same on average, but men tend to be more likely to have extremely high IQs. But anyways, that's about all I wanted to talk about for this video. But basically the big take-home message is that as a society we need to stop pretending that women are unfairly targeted just because they're women. And we need to stop giving them unfair preferential laws, these gender equity laws and whatnot. And by implementing things like that, all you're saying is that you don't think women can compete on a level playing field, which what you're saying is that women aren't the same as men. So people who have that belief are saying that men and women are the same, therefore all outcomes in pay, amount of CEOs and whatnot must be as a result of prejudice or discrimination. So to fix that, we need preferential laws. But what you're saying is, by us needing preferential laws, is that women can't compete on a level playing field. So you're contradicting yourself by making that argument. And that's, anybody who argues for these kind of laws always make that argument. So that's about all I have as far as this video goes. If you liked it, make sure to hit the like and subscribe, and stay tuned for more.